It was chaos in an Oregon courtroom yesterday when a jury acquitted 7 militants who had seized a federal building and wildlife refuge back in January. The anti-government militia was led by the Bundy brothers, whose father held off federal authorities in Nevada 2 years ago.
Not guilty, everybody.
The court said, "Hey, you're free to go, but the marshals might have something to say about it."
And they attacked Mumford. He said, "Give me the paperwork that says that they have a warrant for these U.S. Marshals to hold him here."
Yeah, they had surrounded me at that point, and so I just turned to them and I said, "Guys, show me what papers you have." And the next thing I know, they just had a hold of me.
At that point, he says he was thrown to the ground, his face pushed against the carpet.
I got my hands behind my back at that point, and they got my legs up, and almost like in a hog tie.
I mean, there was like 8 of them on him, and they tased him. The attorney, it's unreal.
They did taser him in the middle of his back and put him behind bars.
They drug me, they drug my brother Ryan out, and they drug David Fry. And David Fry had been acquitted on all charges and had no hold in Nevada, nothing.
If the jury just found me not guilty, how come they're still treating me as a guilty person, making me wear all these chains and stuff?
They literally beat him to the ground and handcuffed him and drug him down. Here he was, an acquitted man of all charges with no other charges on him.
They attacked me. They tackled me and threw me to the ground and put their knees on my back and all that, and as an innocent person.
And he still was transported in belly chains, handcuffs, leg irons.
No one was anticipating that. I think the marshals, the sheriff, everybody was just anticipating a guilty, and therefore they'd be justified in all their atrocities against us.
I think what happened at the end is very symbolic of the inappropriate escalation of force by the federal government.
Are you going to agree? Our freedoms are waning and we'll lose our liberty, slipping one by one until there's nothing left to see. Are you willing to stand with me?
In the previous episode, the Malheur Refuge protesters were arrested and indefinitely detained. They alleged severe mistreatment by their captors, and their attorneys claimed gross judicial and prosecutorial misconduct. In the final verdict, the lower-tier defendants pled or were found guilty. However, shocking the media and the nation, the so-called leaders of the Malheur occupation were found not guilty by a Portland, Oregon jury of their peers. It would seem this case was closed. However, their acquittals merely intensified the political weaponization of labels and government. Hi, I'm Mark Herr with Center for Self-Governance, and this is Governed v. Governing.
These people who hold themselves out to be patriots are not. They're nothing more than domestic terrorists.
This is a breaking news alert.
Breaking news right now. Cliven Bundy has been arrested.
Bunkerville rancher Cliven Bundy put in handcuffs the second he arrives at the airport in Portland, Oregon. He was heading to Burns when he's arrested by FBI agents.
This Nevada rancher, Cliven Bundy, was at the center of a 2014 armed standoff with federal authorities over grazing rights on government land.
Bundy and his supporters were in the midst of a heated clash with the feds. The issue was over land rights. The Bundys are cattle ranchers, the family's time here dating back to the 1800s. For the next century, the family, multiple generations, went about their business. But in 1989, a problem. The U.S. government declared the Mojave Desert turtle an endangered species, which put an end to livestock raising on federal land. For ranchers like Bundy, it was a devastating ruling. Most packed up and left. Bundy stayed.
I said no. I not only said no, I said hell no.
It's a battle for our
freedoms and liberties.
If we don't stand up like we're doing here today, they'll just continue to trot over us.
Take our land back and declare freedom and liberty here in this land.
The county sheriff's failed to protect his people, and so we're here as we the people, taking back our rights.
County commissioner says Bundy supporters better have funeral plans.
This is not BLM land! Your court order does not apply!
Stay calm. It's the people or not, and you guys need to leave. Okay. You need to leave. That's the term.
So they can leave.
For ignoring the fees, the feds seized some of Bundy's cattle. But faced with the prospect of a bloody confrontation, another Ruby Ridge, the government relented, and Bundy and his supporters claimed victory.
We respect it. And they start cutting the fence down and removing it. And the feds pull out. They overrun them. They said, we will shoot you. It's on the audio. And the people start riding through, folks. This is America. This is what made us great.
The West has killed and won!
We sent a message loud and clear across our country and foreign nations this week.
The rancher, Cliven Bundy, and Bundy, with the backing of a grassroots swell from freedom fighters and a slew of TV cameras, successfully got the feds to back down. But the U.S. Senator from Nevada has a warning for the Bundys and America.
It's not over. We can't have an American people that violate the law and just walk away from it. So it's not over. They're nothing more than domestic terrorists.
As a lawmaker standing here with you and before you, we are a nation of laws, and we all have to abide by our laws, especially the federal government.
And Mark, your group has taken a leading effort in tracking these sort of extremist groups around the country.
Yeah, the context is we have seen an absolutely amazing, explosive growth on the part of the radical right that coincides precisely with the rise to power of Barack Obama. The so-called patriot groups or militia groups, which are the ones that are flocking to the Bundy Ranch, numbered a mere 149 in 2008. By 2012, 4 years later, there were 1,360 of these groups by our count. So the proliferation has been staggering. We've never seen anything like it.
How would have the federal government acted if these ranchers were African American?
Well, I think the answer to that question is obvious. You can imagine if a standoff like this developed in some inner city neighborhood in a large city. I think we can all agree that it would not have ended with law enforcement backing off.
Senator Harry Reid says it's not over. Would you agree with him on that?
Well, I imagine they'll probably try to take us back to the court system. It's not over till we stand.
And it's not just Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. The Bundys also hearing from Senator Reid's son, Rory Reid. Now, he's a lawyer and former chairman of the Clark County Commission where the Bundy Ranch is located.
We believe in a country in which we're subject to laws, and we can't just ignore the laws that we don't like. And I think that clearly, if state and federal prosecutors look at this more closely, they're going to find that he broke the law and he should be prosecuted.
So there are two court orders that go against the Bundys, but do you think the Bundys should persevere? Why?
Well, Senator Reid and his gnomish little son want to make this a question of whether they're following federal law or breaking it. And of course they're breaking the law. This is an act of civil disobedience. The whole definition of civil disobedience is breaking the law in a way that provokes a reaction from the authorities that draws attention to the underlying question of justice that you're trying to highlight. In this case, it's a question of the overreaching administrative law branch of the government imposing rules on people without a lot in the way of political recourse, and in a situation in which they are virtual monopolists in the state of Nevada, owning 87 by some estimates, 89 by other estimates % of the land. So yeah, of course they're breaking the law, and I'm glad they're doing it, and I hope they keep doing it.
This is much bigger than just the Bundy family having their cattle literally stolen by the federal government.
It's embarrassing to all Nevadans that we are exporting our homegrown terrorists
into another state.
Because Nevada is sorry.
The groups demanded the arrests of Cliven Bundy, his sons, and their extremist supporters. Some argue backing down from the Bundys and their supporters could set a dangerous trend.
KOIN reports that Cliven Bundy, the patriarch of the Nevada ranching family, was arrested upon arrival at PDX Airport.
We didn't expect this. It was kind of like unreal that it wasn't really happening in our country.
I want to, try to teach people the background, and there's a lot to background. When you get into what we're talking about background, we're talking about, clear back the very first pioneers that came here and created the rights through preemptive rights created through beneficial use. When they stopped their wagon and they halted whole to their horses, the question is, what did they need most at that time? What was the first thing they needed? When he took the very first sip of water, he was making beneficial use of a renewable resource. And that first drink, first come, first served type thing, established rights. The next thing that horse needs, what would he need? He would need something to eat. Well, they didn't have a bale of hay or a sack of grain in that wagon. When the first time he nipped a piece of grass or a piece of browse, he made a beneficial use of a renewable resource. And then he created a right. Okay, this is my wife, Carol Bundy, and I'm Cliven D. Bundy. We live on a ranch near Bunkerville, Nevada, in Clark County, Nevada. And that's part of America.
The media and non-government organizations characterize the Bundy standoff as the victimization of government agents by an extreme anti-government rancher and his so-called violent militant supporters. From so-called endangered turtles and alleged unpaid grazing fees to unlawful escalations of force and a mass grave of executed cows, the reasons given to justify this stunning conflict by the Bundys and the government obscures the declared intentions of the arrested Bundy standoff participants.
And would you really be willing to spill the blood of another American over a fight over, where these cows eat?
This isn't about the cows. This is about a government, a federal government, overstepping its bounds. This is a states' rights issue. We are the sovereign state of Nevada. We are the sovereign people of the United States.
And I just saw federal agents throw my aunt on the ground.
I think that, the real question here, though, is about what Sam Francis used to call a narco-tyranny, a situation in which you have a government that really more or less abdicates its responsibilities at the big national level, not doing things like policing the border, not doing things like making sure that the IRS is following the law and not violating the Hatch Act. But when it comes to little things like defending tortoise habitats, they proceed with all of the rigorousness and obscene moral self-righteousness of a fourth-grade hall monitor.
It's about the freedom of America. We the people, we have to stand up. We have to stand up and fight.
On April 7th of 2014, there was an article published by InfoWars, Paul Joseph Watson, and he showed something going on in Nevada, which at the time I was in Southern California. My studio was in Southern California. I was running an internet radio show. Podcasting was brand new. But this picture showed up, and it showed a picture of a commercial helicopter with a very sophisticated infrared, it's called FLIR, forward-looking infrared. And there were gunners hanging out the side of this commercial helicopter.
Snipers are sitting on the hilltop pointing at, as far as we can tell, and we dig into the information, these are innocent Americans.
It's no different than Mexican drug cartels coming to you and down in Mexico and telling you to pay money to stay on your own property. It's the same thing.
I will go stop you, or I will try to stop you from killing innocent people.
We're here just to give them a security blanket to help them rest easy at night so they can go about their day-to-day business here at the ranch.
Oh, I'm still here because I saw what was going on the news, and my friend James and I, we decided to come out and support the people that were out here and standing up to people that have seriously not read the Federalist Papers or the Constitution.
Are you itching for a fight?
No, not at all. And, I've been in a fight before, and Plato said it best. It's easy to get men to go to war. It's hard to get them to go back. The last thing I want to do is be in another firefight.
Your militarism is going overboard here, and we all know where it's going, eventually.
I didn't know anything about ranchers and cattle. I'm a, city slicker per se. And I reluctantly took the interview, but my team said, this is bigger than cattle. These are Western land issues. And I said, okay, I'll speak to him.
I'm a former United States Marine. I'm a former police officer. I'm a former high school history teacher. I don't make this country more dangerous. I make this country more safe because I teach the founding values.
I interviewed Clive and Bundy. And by the end of, I think, a 2-hour interview, I realized that what this man was saying absolutely required further investigation, that he had been contending with them for, as he indicated, decades, and that it had come to a crescendo, that guns were being pointed and a very heavy force was being put upon a ranching family.
Do you want to irritate the government?
No, we do not want that at all. We have people out here to help provide support to practice their Second Amendment rights and their constitutional privileges, which have been provided to them by a real government.
How long will you stay?
Until Mr. and Mrs. Bundy look at me in the eyes and tell me they're safe and secure, and I can go home to my family and tend to my business that I got down there.
And at the end of that interview, I became very upset during the interview that such things, that if they were true, that should never be allowable in the United States of America.
It's disgusting of how they must think of the Constitution.
Primarily, it was the First Amendment areas. When they post signs that state First Amendment area, our founders set this up as a country in which we can exercise our First Amendment anywhere in the country.
I went there about a First Amendment zone. I went there about people being beaten up for videoing.
I've got no affinity for cattle.
And I was very careful not to break any laws. I didn't break any firearm transportation laws, any of that stuff. I didn't break anything.
If I have any affinity, it's for the Constitution and the First Amendment.
And I knew the law well enough, and I didn't go out there to get in a gunfight.
And I saw Bureau of Land Management body slam a grandmother, surrounding the family with sniper teams.
But what I did go out there to do, and I told the court this as well, so I went out to cause the BLM or the FBI, whoever it was who had the sniper positions above the Bundy's house, to stop. And because my fear was we're going to kill the Bundy family and the kids, especially kids and the women, grandkids.
We have to take history seriously, and this has all happened before in other countries.
Thousands of years.
Yeah, over and over again. I can watch that video right now and get just as angry as I was that day. She had a bottle of water in her hand and a phone, and that other man thought he had the authority to run over there, grab her, pick her up off the ground, and slam her down onto her back.
Through what I was witnessing on social media and Fox News, CNN, I just felt there was something I wanted to take a look at. And so I drove down just to get an actual, get my eyes on the situation.
And it was about them hurting people. That boot on their throats is not something that I could watch and ignore.
My good friend Jerry DeLamus, who went to the Bundy Ranch in 2014, and he went there to defend that family from government overreach, from the Bureau of Land Management.
When the FBI came in, they had their full flak
outfits on, they had their helmets on, they had their black guns in hand. They were ready for a battle in Fallujah. That's what it looked like to me. Like they were coming into some Middle Eastern town and invading our house, which was really ridiculous. We had 2 guards right there up on the landing, and there were other agents in the foyer talking with Jerry, and then there were a line of them along the outside leaning up against the garage wall. And my mother was stirring upstairs because she obviously heard something. And they start to raise the barrels of their guns. And I had to say, gentlemen, that is my mother. She is a victim of Alzheimer's. She's in her 80s. She's no threat to you. So you can please lower your guns.
Most of the people that the FBI picked up, they picked up 2 years later.
They knew who was in this house. And I don't even know if, it makes me believe that the men who were armed and who had all of their gear on may not have been informed. They may not have been told how innocent we really are and how law-abiding and what kind of people and what kind of character we possess. And I think that was another on-purpose thing. And it was unnecessary for them to treat us the way that they did, even to the degree where they could have called us up and said, you know, we have a warrant for your arrest, Jerry. We need to see you in here.
Do you think Jerry would have showed up?
Yes, absolutely. Of course we would. Of course.
Cliven Bundy then flew there to visit his kids in prison, in jail in Portland, and he was arrested by the FBI. And the indictment that came down was not for the Malheur Refuge, it was for the Bundy Ranch. And at that point, we knew they were bringing up indictments for what had occurred 2 years earlier.
They came and picked him up 2 years after this event was over, along with about 19 others. And they culled out those that they felt were more significant.
You know, they waited 2 years. 2 years. And then they come here and say, and Jerry had run for constitutional sheriff. I was a New Hampshire state representative, again. And when they came in, they said that he was a flight risk and a danger to the community.
We can't have an American people that violate the law and just walk away from it, so it's not over.
When they arrested him in our town, in Haley, and he had talked to the sheriff and had a meeting with the sheriff, and you know, for some reason he kind of knew something was going to happen. And so he went to the sheriff because he was very afraid that something like Ruby Ridge would happen.
They took Cliven into custody at the airport, and we all kind of knew what that meant, that if they had indicted him, that we were all probably on the block too.
I can tell you right now, the day I put Cliven on the plane, I knew he wasn't coming home.
So at that time, I went and I approached my local sheriff, went in and I told him what I thought was going to happen.
By the grace of God, I live in a great area in northern Idaho, and I have a couple of very good sheriffs.
You know, the Lavoy Finicum situation had just happened not long before. And it was my opinion that if given the opportunity, they would probably kick in my door in the middle of the night and flashbang my living room.
The sheriffs were both brought into the FBI office with their undersheriffs and asked to guide 2 hostage rescue teams, FBI hostage rescue teams, who were fully kitted up, ready to go, up to my cabin in the middle of the night. Yeah, it would have been a disaster. I probably would not be here had that occurred, but the sheriffs decided to shut the operation down and did not allow the FBI to come to the cabin and do whatever they intended to do.
And I told them, you know, I'll sit right there in that cell until they show up. They're coming. And if they kick in my door at 4 in the morning and flashbang my living room, you know, we're gonna have issues. And I was actually at the time making my kids, you know, they'd fall asleep in the living room. I'd make sure that they got taken back to their... So there was a lot of anxiety about that. So I was willing to just sit there in that cell until they showed up because I knew they were coming. But he didn't allow that.
It was a national sting operation that morning, and they were taking down a lot of people all over the country. And I was receiving calls to that effect.
I think that he probably did have something to do with the way it went down. They did not kick in my door. They came and followed me on the way to work.
Ultimately, when I got to my office, there was this fake client, and he made a call to, he texted the FBI who was outside my office, and in they came. And put a gun between my eyes, then body slammed me through the wall, and took me into custody.
In traffic, I was on my way to work, and I pulled out of traffic, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and 3 cars pulled out of traffic behind me, and I assumed that that was what it was.
They could have called me and said, will you come in? The FBI's here with an indictment and arrest warrant. And I would have come in.
Guys, kits, rifles surrounded my car and my truck, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I got a 45 to my head through the window. Could literally see the slug down the barrel.
Why did they want to send 2 hostage rescue teams when I had let the sheriffs know if there's ever an indictment, just call me and I'll just come down and turn myself in, and we don't need an incident here. But they didn't desire that outcome. They wanted something much different.
I had stopped moving. I put my hands up, right? And they're yelling at me not to move, don't move, don't move. And I said, I'm not moving. And you know, frankly, he said, you move and I'm gonna blow your head off.
I feel that they just wanted to make a very brutal example of anybody that would stand like our founders did on the bridge at Concord. We stood on a bridge in Bunkerville, Nevada.
I said, I'm not moving. He said, do you have a gun? I said, of course I have a gun. I said, where is it? I said, it's in my waistband. And he said, put the truck in park. Now my hands are right here. He told me not to move or he'd shoot me. And then he told me to move.
You know, if they were to have killed me and others, that sends an example to the country, to everybody who feels and believes in liberty, Constitution, justice.
I chose not to move. I told him, please remove me from the vehicle, sir. Please remove me from the vehicle, sir. Please remove me from the vehicle, sir, as he was yelling with the 45 to my head.
I felt that there was still justice in the criminal justice system prior to my arrest, and I learned shortly thereafter that it doesn't exist in any way, shape, or form.
Eventually, another officer stepped in, opened my door. Another FBI agent stepped in, opened my door, and pulled me out and disarmed me. I do believe that if I would have moved, he would have shot me.
The arrested Bundy standoff participants were painted by the media, non-government organizations, and the prosecution as enemies of the state, labeling them extreme, anti-government domestic terrorists. Based on these characterizations, the judge denied their bail, indefinitely detaining them, while their captors treated them as guilty until proven innocent.
They give the government agents information about us that causes them to even be fearful of us, and that we're going to, you know, when they come after us, we're going to shoot them.
It's a sad thing.
Are we a free nation? Do we have our First Amendment rights? No. Do we have our Second Amendment rights? No. Do we can go through all of them. We might think that we're free. We might think we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave, but we no longer do. We no longer do. They've taken all of that away from us slowly. The lack of education in the schools, and we see that more and more now when they even take like Pete Santilli, he's press. Arrest him. They didn't like what he was saying.
These officers, police officers, were listening to my broadcast. They're like, Santilli, you crack me up. You know, keep poking the bear. They were encouraging me.
Women and children. There are women and children there. You know this. Yeah.
So my role along the way was to say, if they come in and slaughter people, it's awful. Here's the truth. These are good people. There's no reason to use military force.
I can persuade that we need to disband this right now.
Okay.
Well, we say that absolutely appreciate the offer.
When I was arrested and put in shackles, it was shocking to even the highest ranks of law enforcement.
Are you arresting Pete Santilli right now, sir? Of course I will. I'm just going to document, okay? I'll stand back here at a safe distance and document them arresting Pete, okay?
At the time most of the arrests were made, it is reported Bundy and his followers were on their way to a community meeting at a senior center to address local residents to discuss their views on federal management of public lands. We're told the Cincinnati native Peter Santilli was arrested a couple hours later.
I wanted a peaceful outcome. So I said, maybe they'll release me in a couple of days. Well, 619 days later, I was released.
As I served, I call serve. I don't know that it was a service. I was a prisoner, a political prisoner. For 8 months, I was in what you call solitary confinement. And what solitary confinement means is like you're in jail in jail. So in other words, you're in jail, but now they got a jail they're going to put you in. So for 8 months, I was in a room about the size of most people's bathroom. I had a bed in there, and I had a sink and a toilet. Had a blanket, no pillow. I did have a little pad. And I spent 8 months of the 700 days in that situation.
I don't know how to put it into words, but when you're placed in a cage that you cannot get out of, when you've been used to freedom and liberty, my backyard was 1 million acres. And now I'm in a room that's 7 foot wide and 11 foot long. It's like being locked in your bathroom for 2 years.
But I had no idea I was going to have to endure that for 2 years. And so it was difficult. It was just so difficult. Like, it's hard to explain. So you do get down, even though you still get down. You still are so tired of being in there, so lonely for your family and, hurting. And
it was seven months, I believe, before we ever got to the first trial.
I transferred down to Nevada after we won and were acquitted in Oregon, and I began to understand a little more about what these people were doing to us. Not just the jail. I'm talking about the prosecutors, possibly the courts, this overall plot that was against us and the American people. I began to study and understand. I was reading a ton. I mean, we had a lot of time. It was the worst incarceration that I've endured. It was a 3x3 shower stall, and it has these doors that they can completely lock, so they're just, you're locked in there. And they put me in there because I wouldn't strip. They basically said they're going to leave me in there until I strip, and I wouldn't, and so I was handcuffed, and it was excruciating to be handcuffed that long behind your back. My wrists were swelling up beyond the size of the handcuffs and cutting circulation off, and had to go to the bathroom a few times, which I just had to go down the drain, and I didn't want to push the shower button on because it was just a shower that was I would have got completely drenched, and it was already very cold in there. However, my brother was actually in solitary confinement, and these showers were across the corridor from the solitary confinement. And so he was in there, and he could see what was happening to me. And so he got the phone. What they do is they roll, when you're in solitary confinement, they roll the phone in front of you, and then you have to reach to the little food port and make your phone calls. Well, somehow he got one of them. They probably weren't putting two and two together, but he got one of them to bring him the phone, one of the guards to bring the phone, and he began to call out. And he calls my wife. He calls a bunch of supporters and everything, and then they began to flood the prison with phone calls and media and everything. And then the prison's like, we better get him out of here. We can't.
Hey, everybody. Okay, you're good. Listen, everybody, this is Hey, we were all out there on the yard. We saw the flags, and
But I am convinced to this day that they were planning on leaving me in there until I was so fatigued and dehydrated that they had to take me out, put me on an IV.
There were instances where there were supporters that were going around the prison with horses and flags and shofars, horn trumpets. And they would lock the entire prison down, no phone calls in or out.
We were housed in Pahrump, which is a detention center for transferees. You're getting transferred from one prison to the other. It's not for long term, but I spent 28 months there.
You're supposed to have a right to bail.
Yeah, but we were all kind of in different units. They tried to keep us mostly separated, right? So we were all in different units.
You grow up thinking that there's a justice system. Well, it's a judicial system. Justice, I guess it depends on your idea of justice.
Then ultimately, when we were put on trial, we were housed at Henderson Detention Center, which is, let's just say subpar to cleanliness and a decent environment to be in prison and fighting for your life. You have virtually no access to computers, so you can't prep for the next day's trial. You're just kept in general population where it's just incredibly loud. You can't sleep. It's just, they stack the cards against you so that you lose.
Speedy trials, you're supposed to have a right to a speedy trial. Well, you come to find out that that's not necessarily true.
First they handed us this huge discovery. It was terabytes and terabytes of information, right? And we had to comb through it and look for the relevant stuff and correlate the accusations to the evidence that would help us, right? And prove that we were innocent.
Supposedly we were too big of a threat to the United States, to civilization in general.
So doing that is already, tricky, we'll say. And to try to do it in that environment was basically impossible. You get to sign up for this thing called the law library, right? And they got a couple broke down computers and they've only got 10 of them, so they're only gonna let 10 people in at a time, and you only get 2 hours a day, right? So it's 2 hours in the law library and then 22 hours on a bunk, right? It's not enough time, it's not enough access, it's not enough anything to do what you need to do. They asserted that it was a complex case and that's why they waived our speedy trial rights on us. Now, if we're gonna follow that line of thinking and it's a complex case and there's so much discovery, yet I've only got 2 hours a day to look at it and I don't have the ability to print things out and take it back to my bunk, and I don't have, there was so much that we didn't have, and they set you up so that you don't have it, so that you don't have the ability to properly investigate your own case and the accusations made against you.
They want to keep defendants away from the internet or their ability to defend themselves. So putting you in the jail system, they can contain you. They can say that you're on lockdown. You can't have access to a computer. It's a danger. It's contraband, and for your safety, you can't have access to paperwork. We had to fight tooth and nail. I started out with 7 months of solitary confinement, 1 hour out, 30 minutes, 1 hour out. I spent 30 minutes on the phone doing telephone calls. So 1 hour out, take a shower, do your telephone calls, and then go back in under lockdown. And they expect you to defend yourself. That is horrifying. You cannot get, that is not due process. That is an intentional abuse of power and setting up a win for the federal government, period.
The food again was so bad, but someone, I don't know where they got it, somehow they smuggled in some salt and pepper, simple salt and pepper. And they shared it around to the different inmates. And so I got, just a little a little bit of salt, and a little bit of pepper, you know, and I just had it folded in a piece of paper, you know. And but the jailers found that I had pepper, and they threw me in the hole for a week because I had pepper. And they said, oh, ground black pepper, that's a potential weapon.
Talk about abuse. You see my son like Davy, for example. He is the most loving, most kind, most forgiving, and has served so many people in his life. And I see him laying on that bunk, mourning over his wife and his little kids. Day after day after day, many of those 700 days, he was so sick because of him not being able to take care of his family and be with them. Now that is suffering. That is abuse. That is our federal government treating a human being unhuman. And he wasn't guilty of nothing. You notice they didn't even take him to trial. They actually dismissed after he spent his 700 days in jail. Now, if you want to talk about abuse, that's abuse.
When my brother Mel went into one of his, I think his first release hearing, or could be his second release hearing, and he had a brand new baby, pretty much, just a month or two old when he was incarcerated. And his release hearing was 2 or 3 months into his incarceration. And we weren't allowed to see our children, have any contact with our wives or children, you know, as far as physical contact with them. And so when he came into that courtroom, he got to see his wife and his little baby. Now, he wasn't able to get close to them, but he was able to see in the same room, and his little baby had grown up. And it made him tremendously sad. And he wanted to hold his baby. And he was holding his hand out, and the marshals were keeping him from going and holding that little baby. They were separating him from his wife and his little baby. And he began to cry, and he wanted to hold his baby. And then the release hearing went on, and of course they lied a bunch of wicked things about this good man. And after the release hearing, one of the prosecutors, she's a woman, went to the bathroom, and there was another individual that was in that bathroom and overheard her talking on the phone while she was in the bathroom stall. And she was laughing and saying, little does he know he'll never get to hold that baby ever the rest of his life. And she was making fun of that because he was crying over it.
My daughter in Boise took me a couple of days to get in touch with her. It brought us a lot closer.
It's been really hard. You know, my son is just turned 1 in February, and he hasn't met his grandpa yet. So that's been really hard. So we just want to bring him home.
She helped me get through a lot of this. Being able to have somebody to call every day.
So the medical facilities inside of prisons is akin to, say, a elementary school medical facility. You can be dying of cancer, they'll give you an ibuprofen.
There was a specific instance with Cliven not receiving the attention that he should have for a particular ailment.
He had a cavity or something happen, and a tooth got infected. And they would not take care of it. And their policy in there is they only pull teeth, they don't repair them. Well, my dad, you know, he's trying to save his teeth, and it's just a cavity or something. He's not wanting to pull his tooth because he has a cavity, but that's the choice he's facing. Either pull your tooth or nothing.
There was always a concern that we might do something to induce the other prisoners. Well, in this instance with Cliven, that was a real threat, and it wasn't the only one where there was that concern.
What ended up happening was that ended up getting infected into his jaw, And his whole side of his face, all the way up to the top of his head, all the way down, clear, was swollen. It was a huge swollen because it was infected. The other prisoners could see that this was probably going to kill my father. I mean, if it continued, the infection was going to spread, and they threatened to riot if they didn't take care of my dad.
You know, they don't punch very often in there. They don't want to bruise or you know, but they still have ways to hurt you that doesn't leave so much of a trace. So they can't, again, they're careful trying to eliminate their liability.
Jerry was like a pastor in our unit. And if you can picture our unit, a unit, you know, it's not even a real jail. It looks like if you cleared out a Home Depot and then you put a bunch of bunk beds in it, that was our unit. Concrete floor, a lot of people in there. The majority of whom were held wrongfully. Period. There was somebody who had gotten sick and he should not have been there. He was older, he should have been released, but they kept him there. And his heart was ailing. And one day it came to a head.
And Pete Santilli, now we're having breakfast, sitting at the table in the unit. And he goes, "What's going on?" So I turn around, there were a bunch of guys standing around this black guy, right? And I knew him, I didn't know him well.
And we understood what was going on. We knew that person was ill, and Jerry just, without even thinking about it.
So I put my ear down by his mouth, and he wasn't breathing. I said, "He's not breathing."
And he immediately, without thinking, it was instinct, went down, checked for breathing and a pulse, and immediately began administering first aid, CPR, immediately.
So I was like, okay, and I'm thinking, I hope he didn't have anything. But he's laying there, so I know something's wrong. So I pinch his nose and start blowing oxygen, breaths into him.
What do we do, when we're in an environment like that as patriots? We were recognized as civil rights activists. We were recognized as prayer warriors. Jerry DeLamis led that effort.
Through that, it ended all of the racism in that unit, 96 men, who the blacks wouldn't eat with the whites wouldn't eat with the blacks. There's 2 Mexican groups that wouldn't eat with the other Mexican group, and it stopped that racism. And I led the whole unit prayer they asked me to.
To feature and highlight that above and beyond, I don't want to take away from it wasn't just a one-off incident. That's exactly who each and every one of these patriots are. They got wrapped up in this thing. And that's exactly who Jerry DeLamis is, in or out of federal custody.
Made up these meals the next Saturday, and they had the white table set up and the black table and the Mexican tables. They had them all set up. And I had 2 black guys standing beside me. And I was running a really big prayer service and Bible study in there all the time.
There is absolutely a very rigorous separation of races.
They provoke, racial division. I mean, they're all set up they allow for gangs to, quote unquote, click up.
Different groups vying for control, and mostly what they say they're trying to do is keep the peace amongst themselves, but everybody has different intentions, and some of them do have a criminal mindset.
When I was at the white table, they go, "Jerry, come over and grab something." So I grabbed, I think it was burritos or whatever it was they made, and I had one in each hand. There's 2 black guys on the side of me, which you're not supposed to give the black guys white man's food, and you're not supposed to give the white man black man's food, or you're not supposed to give the black guy Mexican food, and you're not supposed to give that Mexican black man's food. It's just idiotic, I couldn't believe it when I saw it. It's like, the hell's wrong with us? The government allows this?
I took it upon myself to not comply with it socially.
I had 2 burritos, and my black buddies were next to me. I handed them to them right at the white table. I said, "Here, you guys have these ones." So they're chomping them down, right? All right. And so then some of the Mexicans go, "Jerry, come over and try this," because everybody made different things, right? Prison food, but they all made different. So I went over to the Mexican table, and I gave a bunch of that to some of the other Mexicans at the other table, and I just kept mixing the food up on there. Before you knew it, everybody was eating with each other.
When I would be called to a, white car meeting, I would literally say, "Don't ever call me to a meeting like this. I'd rather be shanked and bleed out in the middle of the floor. I'm on the Santilli unicycle. I don't ride with anybody's car."
I saw it sort of as a duty to not participate in that system.
And they separate themselves sort of in gangs.
It is one of the most segregated, highly racist.
But I had a good relationship with all of them, and I never really reached out to them as much as they reached out to me.
But the federal government encourages that racism, stokes it, and turns a blind eye to it, if not fuels that fire, and I refuse to participate in it.
Is I didn't have any enemies in those jails. I had people that basically come and express their love to me.
That they were supportive. I would say the general tenor of the people that we encountered, what was going on. The ones who knew what we were in there for.
I had a black guy, and he was clear on the other end of the pod, and he come over and he said, "I just want to thank you." And I'm wondering really why you want to thank me, but he appreciated my stand for whatever they feel like I did. They appreciated my stand and told me how much he appreciated me. Give me a big hug. I mean,
so why would I want to stand by him that day?
How can you express people's love? I had a lot of people's love.
Torture, racial segregation, and questionable health care. Is the innocent until proven guilty doctrine suspended for U.S. citizens who find themselves indefinitely detained because they have been labeled, but not charged, as domestic terrorists? Will the label of domestic terrorism inevitably pervert justice for the accused?
Now to our top story, the Salt Lake lawyer who says that he was mistreated by federal marshals inside a courtroom.
Marcus was arrested. He was arrested. So instead of getting to go out with everyone else and enjoy the victory and celebrate the victory on the front steps of the courthouse, he was being detained by the U.S. Marshals.
A good friend of mine reached out to me that night and said, "You proved your case, and then they proved your case too."
They wanted to prosecute him. They wanted to prosecute him for interfering with federal officers. Once Marcus subpoenaed the text messages of the marshals who had tased him and arrested him, they dropped the case. Well, unfortunately, that wasn't acceptable to the federal bench because Judge Mossman in Oregon filed a complaint against Marcus, which ended up with Marcus voluntarily agreeing not to practice law in Oregon anymore. Marcus gets basically kicked out of the practice of law in Oregon because of this case. When we then wanted to go to Nevada to then defend Ammon in Nevada, because of this and because of attacks that started to be leveled at Marcus also in his home state of Utah, he was unable to join our team in Nevada. I think the government knew that after their loss in Oregon, they had to win this. There was a lot of animosity towards us. There was one day where we went to the court and somebody says, "Hey, you got to get out of here. The marshals are going to arrest you," to Rick. And we're like, "What do you mean they're going to arrest him? Judge Navarro knows he's here. There's no problems." And they were like, "I don't know. You just better be careful." So we were trying to figure out why. And it turns out that there was a warrant for Rick's arrest. And when we explored why there was a warrant, we found out that the warrant had been issued by Wendover, Nevada. Now, fortunately, and I don't know if the government didn't know this or what, but Wendover's a very small town. And so we called the clerk of the court and said, "Hey, what gives? Why is there a warrant for this guy's arrest?" And the clerk in Nevada said, "Oh, I got a phone call from the government, and they asked me to issue a warrant for your unpaid parking ticket." So the government was messing with our defense team, going as far as to calling Wendover, Nevada, and asking them to issue a warrant for an unpaid parking ticket so they could arrest my paralegal.
So there was 19 of us that were indicted. They split us up into 3 trial groups, and I was in the first group, and there were 6 of us that were put on trial for the first trial. And we were called the gunmen. And they wanted to get us convicted, which would help their subsequent trials against the other defendants. So I didn't know any of them until I met them in the prison. Nobody pled out in our group. There was a lot of things that occurred in that courtroom. I sat next to a 20-year trial attorney, and he said he had never seen such corruption and justice, and he said, you guys are in a whole lot of trouble. This is beyond anything he had ever experienced. I attempted on multiple occasions. Like I said, I was pro se, so I was my own attorney. I would attempt on many occasions to prove that there were snipers surrounding the Bundy Ranch, snipers on the hills, and she continually stopped me from even mentioning. Ultimately, she said, don't even mention the word sniper in my courtroom. I was stripped of my right to defend myself by the judge. When I asked one question about the special agent in charge, I'm stripped of my right to defend myself, and my case is now being handled by the standby attorney who had been sleeping every day next to me. So Dan Love was the special agent in charge of the cattle gather. He was the key protagonist in the whole operation. He actually disobeyed the U.S. Attorney's Office when they gave him explicit orders to not escalate, not militarize this cattle gather. And he basically told them, don't tell me how to do my job, I won't tell you how to do your job. So he in essence went rogue on the U.S. Attorney's Office and convened a small army, 135 heavily armed officers. He brought out an MRAP, he brought out attack dogs, he brought out multiple sniper teams. He surrounded the Bundy Ranch, the house, with sniper teams 2 nights in a row prior to any protesters even arriving. This guy has a history of evil deeds, especially when you look back into, say, Dr. Red and the things that he inflicted upon him that ultimately caused the doctor to commit suicide.
So one of the things we got out of the testimony of the BLM director was that her view of how they were approaching the impoundment differed from the approach that the law enforcement wing wanted to take. And the person in charge was Special Agent Dan Love, who coincidentally had a close relationship to FBI Director Greg Bretzing when he was a special agent in southern Utah and Nevada, who had become the FBI director during the Bundy occupation of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. What a coincidence, right? That the same agent who is involved with Dan Love in an operation called Operation Cerberus in southern Utah, which leads to the death of Dr. Red, then goes and participates in the impoundment operation in Nevada. Bretzing takes off to Oregon as the director. Dan Love stays here in Nevada, later engages in some public corruption for which he gets fired surrounding Burning Man because he's trading in antiquities, which is what he went after Dr. Red for. And Bretzing then goes over to Oregon so that when Ammon winds up in Oregon, guess who's there waiting for him, right? Greg Bretzing. What a coincidence. There's no doubt that when the problems begin between Cliven Bundy and the BLM, there is no federal law enforcement wing to go out and do the bidding of the federal government, unless you want to call out the military. It's not till about 2008 that you have a real prominent law enforcement presence within not just the federal government in the West through the FBI, but law enforcement within the BLM.
That training they're implementing, the laws that they're putting in place, the NDAA, indefinite detention, the the Patriot Act. It's all been coming and it's all in place now. And you, if you're looking, and you have to ask yourself, well, why?
Of the 6 of us, 2 of us were convicted, and the other 4 hung the jury on all counts.
Another very disturbing tactics of the FBI was to send in an undercover film crew to Bunkerville, Longbow Productions.
Hello, Bundy's.
Yes, can I speak with Clive Bundy, please?
May I ask who's calling?
This is Charles Johnson with Longbow Productions.
Post 2014, but before Malheur, it was almost like they were going around trying to get somebody to say something that would justify, arrest. When they first initially called, they called my dad, and my dad really didn't want to talk to him, and my dad referred them to me.
This is Ammon Bundy. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
I don't know if you could tell, there's a little level of uncomfortable, and just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Absolutely.
The website was all cheap. Like, I could have done it in like a half a day. Take a domain, open up an account, and put some generic pictures in it and a few little words, and it was really cheap.
All right, clown set.
And then I spoke to my dad, and my dad says, well, I think they're FBI. And, why? Because of the way they're acting, where they're at. And then my sister, Bailey, I believe it was, did some background research on them, and there was an address on it. And she went to the address, and the address was a building, and then it ended up being registered with the federal government. Only used one longbow footage, and that was the one for Greg Burleson. All the rest they didn't want to use. They wouldn't. They actually tried to eliminate it from being in the trial.
Got some drink, cold beer, mixed drink, what would you prefer? If you need to use the bathroom, if you need to refill on your drink, if you need to move around, we'll do it, but just finish the thought. Don't be moving and talking at the same time, because then we lose focus real quick.
And on that note, I'd like another shot.
Roger, wasn't Greg Burleson the one who the FBI pretended to be a fake news crew and plied him with liquor?
Absolutely.
Longbow also fed many people alcohol to get them intoxicated and talk on camera.
Federal prosecutors used some of the footage to help convict Burleson of 8 charges, including threatening and assaulting a federal officer.
So basically the FBI had a van full of liquor, and they were driving around to interview they were faking themselves and pretending to be a documentary film crew. And they had a pretty girl, and she was hot, and she would come up to these guys and say, hey, we're doing a documentary film about the Bundy Ranch episode. Hey, we want you to be in the film, and they'd give them free booze. Mr. Burleson, I know for a fact, had 2 shots of whiskey and a beer or 2 or 3.
Regardless of whether you like him, dislike him, how he was dressed, how many teeth he was missing, what he said. And they got him drunk 6 months after Bundy Ranch and turned on the camera in a documentary film and played his words, which should have never, ever been played, because Longbow Productions was FBI. That couldn't be presented to the jury. The FBI was getting Greg Burleson drunk, and then they were recording his words that he used 6 months after Bundy Ranch.
I have to know, have you ever killed anybody?
I can't tell you that.
He ended up getting sentenced to 68 years. He had been rendered blind. He was a blind man at that time. I believe he's still in prison, in a medical prison in Florida right now, completely blind, and he will probably die in prison, unfortunately.
I've spent years pouring through the case files of terrorism prosecutions in the United States, and I've come to the conclusion that the FBI is much better at creating terrorists than it is at catching terrorists. In the 14 years since 9/11, you can count about 6 real terrorist attacks in the United States. In those same 14 years, the Bureau, however, has bragged about how it's foiled dozens of terrorism plots. In all, the FBI has arrested more than 175 people in aggressive undercover counterterrorism stings. These operations, which are usually led by an informant, provide the means and opportunity, and sometimes even the idea, for mentally ill and economically desperate people to become what we now term terrorists. After 9/11, the FBI was given an edict. Never again. Never another attack on American soil. FBI agents were told to find terrorists before they strike. To do this, agents recruited a network of more than 15,000 informants nationwide, all looking for anyone who might be dangerous. An informant can earn $100,000 or more for every terrorism case they bring to the FBI. That's right, the FBI is paying mostly criminals and con men 6 figures to spy on communities in the United States. Behind closed doors, FBI agents admitted that what they were doing was farcical. A federal judge doesn't want you to hear about these conversations. He sealed the transcripts and placed them under a protective order in an attempt to prevent someone like me from doing something like this.
Is the legal prohibition against entrapment being undermined by a new bureaucratic doctrine where law enforcement questionably provokes U.S. citizens to say things or radicalizes them to do things that appears to intend to commit violent acts of so-called domestic terrorism?
When my attorney came in, and we're in a private little room, as private as you get in prison, and he goes, "I've got some paperwork I want you to look at." And I see it's a plea agreement. And mind you, the plea agreement's already been made up, and it's made up by the prosecution. Dad, I look through it, I go, "This is all a bunch of lies." I go, "What are you bringing me this for?" And he said, "Well, I just really want you to look it over." And I said, "Well, if I sign this thing, you're asking me to perjure myself." And he goes, "Oh, no, I'm not, no, that's not what I'm doing." I said, "You're handing it to me, so you're a party to it. You know what I've told you is the truth. You know, I've been very specific. And not only are you asking me to perjure myself, but the prosecutor's asking me to perjure myself because he knows damn well these are a bunch of lies. It's all made up stuff. They didn't have the right date that I was there." When Sue had told me that Jack had been confronted by the FBI.
Jack Comerford. He was threatened. The FBI was following us all around. They went not only to Jack's house, but to other homes as well. And they went to Jack and said, "We're going to extradite you at the end of September and bring you out to Nevada and get you in front of the grand jury."
I had guys tell me, "Jerry, don't take the plea, don't take the plea, don't take the plea." And I thought, if they put Jack, they hold him just for trial, never even convict him, he's gonna probably be dead before we even get to trial.
We were afraid he was going to be indicted. At the time, he had lymphoma and was fighting that particular kind of cancer, which we know is deadly. It's always deadly. And his wife and his family had been taking excellent care of him, and what we feared was that he was going to be really adversely affected if he had to go to prison.
When she told me that they may, I thought, indict or extradite him to Nevada, and Jack had said, if that happens, I'm going to die in prison. Because they had already told us that they took our case and they made it a complex case. Even though our attorneys fought it, we wanted to go right to trial. And but the government, who had worked the case for 2 years already, trying to make a case against us, said no, it's too complex. And the judge was so biased, she went with whatever the prosecution wanted. And Jack was on a stringent diet for his cancer. Everything was blended with the slow blend. I don't even know how it all went, but it was a complex thing, and to hold his cancer off. And I've known Jack for over 30 years, and through as friends, and we worked together, and he was a brother.
So I told Jerry over the phone, and as soon as Jerry found out about it, it was very concerning. And lo and behold, shortly after that, he was offered a plea deal. And they profile. Those guys know exactly who Jerry is. They know who I am. They know who we were and are. And they knew that Jerry would do anything he could possibly do to keep Jack safe and home with his family where he belongs.
I said, well, the prosecution, I know but they guarantee that to me. I know they're not going to guarantee it to me in writing, so I'm going to, unfortunately, have to trust them. But would they not indict him? And he doesn't say yes, but he gives me the nod. He gives me this. And I said, all right, so due to your help and that of the prosecution, and obviously the FBI, I'm going to have to perjure myself. Why?
To save his friend.
And sign that plea agreement. And so I said, but there's got to be some changes on this thing.
For liberty's sake, for truth's sake, for honor's sake, for the country, for helping others, for being selfless.
So there's no greater love. Try not to get weepy. Not a man will give his life for his brother. Jesus' words, not mine, his. And I thought, well, now you get to put the talking and the preaching to work. I thought, I'll take that hit. That's what I did. I took the plea. And because I couldn't risk Jack dying, waiting for his day in court, waiting for justice that was never going to come. There's no justice, wasn't even a part of the equation. And I just wasn't going to let it happen if there was any way to stop it. It was well worth it. I mean, his last year was really hard on him and Sarah, his wife, because he was really sick. And, but because the cancer came back with a vengeance. But at least he got like 4 really good years. And in the last year, he accepted Christ, which I'd been pushing on him to do for such a long time. It all made it even that much more worth me spending 6 years in prison. And so I had no regrets about it. I still don't have any regrets. And to be honest with you, that whole stay in prison was a blessing. Ammon, as far as when I took the plea and I got the letter that he forgave me, I'll tell you at first, as I was angry by it, when I read it, I was like, what do I need your forgiveness for? I didn't ask your permission to go out there, and I went out there for your dad and you and your kids and the rest of the grandkids and the other brothers and such, and Carol, Cliven's wife, and Ammon's wife, any of the wives that were out there. And I didn't go out there to please you. I was moved immediately to go out there. And so that's when God gives us a direction to do something, through this Holy Spirit. It may sound funny to some, and it's too bad it does because they really need to get in touch with that, is you go. You go. I'm a Marine, and when your commanding officer gives you an order to go do something, you go do it, and you do to the best of your pop. And you know there's a risk. I mean, life's a risk, and what better risk is there than trying to prevent anyone, and that includes the law enforcement that was out there at the Bundys, and the families and all the other people who were out there. That included that, and that's part of the reason I stayed out there for the 3 weeks I did, is because I just wanted to make sure nobody did something stupid or anybody got hurt. And I had many talks about that. I even told if they shot at us, we can't shoot at them. I called meetings 3 different times out there, and I said, if you can't abide by that, I thank you for coming, but you should leave. And no harm, no foul. But I don't want anybody here, even if we get shot at, to shoot back at law enforcement, because the minute we do that, we're going to be the bad guys, and we're not lawless. We're standing up for the rule of law, not to be opposed to it, and because that's exactly how it got played. Yeah, Sue came in with her wad and $80, and there's hymns and songs written on them that she would sing me. And of course, when Sue sings, everybody hears it, even the guards and everybody else in visit. Of course, everybody loved it.
I will go where you send me. I will follow where you lead me. Thanks, Gracie.
Back up.
I will do what you ask me. I will. I will sing of your goodness. I will wait in the silence. Oh, to be in your presence. I will. Well, I have seen the beauty of surrender and...
Cry.
Cut it out, this one. Why did I choose this one?
Because it's wonderful.
I am free.
Hit it.
When I become your prisoner. That's pretty apropos. So write your name on my heart. I am yours.
So in the first trial, obviously what the jury saw was that what the prosecution was trying to put forward, the government was trying to put forward, isn't what happened. That's not what we were about down there. 10 jurors vote to acquit 4 of us. The jury saw that we didn't intend to go harm anyone. We didn't intend to assault anyone. We didn't intend to interfere with any interstate commerce. So it ends up as a hung jury.
There was a lot of witness intimidation. So, the prosecution got to go for weeks and weeks. And then we had 3 people testify because they were saying, if you come in to testify, here's an indictment and you'll be arrested. And then if the people still didn't show up, they gave them a lawyer and sent them back to talk to the lawyer for 40 minutes. And if they still decided to, the judge was going to talk to them for 10 minutes to try to talk them out of it. I spent weeks and weeks visiting with these guys, talking with them, doing everything, doing their laundry every single week, meeting with their family, talking to their family if their family wasn't there, helping their family when their family did get to town, going through the same situation that I had gone through. So here I'm sitting there trying to feel relief for myself and feeling just devastated about Todd Engel and Greg Burleson.
It's decided that there's going to be a second trial.
Right at the same time that they announced that there was a hung jury, they said they're going back and we'll start this next trial on this date. They gave it 30 days.
Their pride was a little hurt. They were real quick to say that they were going again.
I was told in the first trial that, you don't need to tell your story. They have to prove your guilt. Well, all of a sudden they haven't proven our guilt, but here we go with a second trial.
I always expected I would have to explain why I took a defensive position. And I was prepared to do that, and am still, and always have been prepared to do that. But it's when they limit the truth that the problems occur. The motion of limine starts years and years back with the idea that if I stole a candy bar in junior high, the prosecution can't bring that up because it has nothing to do with the charges, right? And so this is initially an intended safeguard for the people and due process. But what has happened is that the government asserts their right to have things not put into the trial and not put in front of the jury. And so what we ended up with was this motion of limine, which was the prosecution asking the judge for us to not be able to mention snipers, militarization of the Bureau of Land Management, First Amendment, Second Amendment, self-defense, defense of others. These are all things I could not say in front of the jury. And it was that motion of limine that caused it.
What we're seeing inside is he is bound and gagged, even though he is not physically bound. They had a sidebar that lasted, what do you think, 20
minutes, I
20
guess.
minutes. And it's heartbreaking in there, but I believe at least some of this the jury is seeing. They've heard of all these videos that they haven't seen. Now they're bringing up posts. He can't even talk about what he's seen or the reason that he went to Bunkerville.
That limiting of our testimony was all the judge's decision. She was of the opinion there was no evidence that there was snipers or that they were being heavy-handed or that there was militarization, and all of those things, those were the exculpatory evidence that was withheld intentionally.
Through this trial, they kind of took a different approach. Instead of all of the evidence like they did the first trial, this time they went through with almost no evidence. You know, they said, well, even the evidence they were entering would still show BLM and the officers in a bad light. So they tried to go on like almost no evidence at all. Like, you know, there's all of this footage, right? And in the first trial, we spent hours watching footage. But in the second trial, they would play maybe a minute of the footage and then be done. And I remember the jury questions. Jury was allowed to ask questions at the end of each witness. And I remember the jury questions at one point being like, when are we gonna see some evidence? And the judge said to them, in some cases, there's no evidence at all. You have to go on testimony alone. And at that point, I realized that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to act like there is no evidence. We all know there's terabytes of evidence. There's so much evidence that he couldn't even get through it all. A year in prison sitting there trying to get through it all. And they're acting like there's hardly anything at all and trying to portray that to the jury.
The judge herself calls a sidebar, and Eric Parker is ripped from the stand and no longer allowed to testify.
Those motions of limine are the same thing that led to me being thrown off the stand in the second trial, because I tried to say, you know, my lawyer asked me what I was worried about, concerned with, and I wasn't allowed to say snipers, so I said up and to the right, and they threw me off the stand.
The jury saw what was going on. They saw.
I'm in shock. Everyone around me is in shock. You know, here's a courtroom that we're supposed to be completely silent and everyone's like, oh, you know, what's going on? Of course, we're not getting thrown out at this point because we're saying it. The media is saying it over there. The jury is doing the same thing. Eric's sitting there like, what's going on? Because she never even looks at him and says, you're done.
The government was trying to hide things. They wouldn't let us bring out the whole truth. And, you know, when people start getting thrown off the stands for trying to tell the truth, when the prosecution is losing their mind because you won't change your story to fit their narrative, the jury sees that. They saw what happened.
I followed her orders, I followed the court's order, and they still didn't like what I had to say. So they took me off the stand, wiped my testimony, and that was that.
Second trial, the jury comes back with 11 not guilty on all counts, and one juror said guilty on one count.
So I thought for sure they weren't going to go for another trial here. Like, you know, they were almost fully acquitted. It was 10-1. 11 to 1. This one lady was the holdout.
So now you've had 21 people saying not guilty. You've had 3 people saying guilty. When do they say, okay, we're not even going to get 50%?
So how could they continue going? It was almost completely acquitted.
At this point, you're pretty much crushed because the feeling that comes over you is, we're never going to get out of here. They're just going to keep going until they finally get what they want. They will do this again and again and again until they get the results that they want.
So here, it's like, yay, it's a win. You know, we have 2 people that are fully acquitted and 2 people that are, you know, at least being released from prison, who've been sitting in prison for 2 years.
Guilt is supposed to be beyond a reasonable doubt. 2 trials.
And so they said that they're still going to go again, but they let him out.
And we have some breaking news. No guilty verdicts in the armed standoff with federal authorities here in Nevada, according to the AP and the Las Vegas Review-Journal.
That part again. Where is that little white bird? You're trying
They say, well, okay, we're going to give you pre-trial release. And your jaw just kind of hits the floor. You're like, what do you mean, pre-trial release? What, did I suddenly become so much less dangerous that now you can trust me on the street?
All 4 of our defendants have been released.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the stand for us in our first trial. It was amazing. I can't believe this. I can't believe it. I need a picture.
He gets put in a halfway house for the first night. We get 2 released. I'm allowed to drive them from the jail to the halfway house, so we get an hour. You know, obviously we get them some food, celebrations, like I said, but it's bittersweet. I get an hour and he's back in jail, but I still have 2. You know, we're still together with 2.
News comes through. We find out that my local rep, Dorothy Moon, has been heavily involved, all the actions that she's been taking to get our state government involved.
The second trial ended, and we had an 11-1 to acquit. And then I heard they were going to have a 3rd trial. That's what spurred me into action.
As a citizen of Idaho, it was our duty to stand up for our fellow constituent. And so our legislator, Dorothy Moon, took it upon herself in writing a letter and gathering support. We helped facilitate gathering signatures for that letter.
I mailed it to Donald Trump, and Grassley, Attorney General Sessions, our 2 congressmen and our 2 senators here in the state of Idaho.
And then she turned that into Raul Labrador.
Over and over at different town hall meetings, people would bring it up, and he would know it's too political. At some point, I think it was said to him, when a judge says that the Constitution has no place in their courtroom, is that bad behavior? Would that be considered bad behavior according to Article 3, Section 1? Can you get involved at this point? And I think that continued messaging to him, and then with the letter from Dorothy and the continued, we talked to his staff people over several months, phone calls, informing them, read the case, you know, read the stuff. He finally decided, yeah, maybe I need to look at this.
A couple of weeks after this letter initially went out, he was going to make sure that Sessions had it in his hands. So Congressman Labrador did just that. He got it to Attorney General Sessions, the Assistant Attorney General, and the government liaison for the Attorney General's office, and they discussed it for a couple of hours, and it was almost immediately after the meeting, he called me, as well as Representative Judy Boyle, to discuss what happened. So once Congressman Labrador called and had a conference call after the meeting, I knew something was going to happen. That was on a Friday. The following Monday, things must have been happening because there was a plea agreement on the table on Wednesday.
From considering trying these men a 3rd time to flipping around and trying to make a plea deal to make this go away.
How about you take a misdemeanor? So now all of a sudden your life has gone from I might spend 120 years, the rest of my life, die in prison, to, hey, how about you plead guilty to something like jaywalking?
I'm still mad at them for playing out because they're not guilty. Right. Eric Parker and Scott Drexler, to me, are heroes. They should be given a Presidential Medal of Honor. Those men who did that That's the kind of men America needs. They are the men who are willing to come and defend liberty.
Innocent lives.
And innocent lives.
He's still, like, we come down to take the plea. We have to be in court to take the plea. And that's when they go through, you know, if you don't take this plea, you're offered a trial, so somewhat of a fair trial, or supposedly a fair trial. And then, you know, we just want to be sentenced and go home. We want to be done. But they're like, no, we're gonna push your sentencing back quite a few months. And in my mind, they were pushing it back till the end of the next trial to make sure you don't testify for the other people.
Between pretrial motions to limit evidence, witnesses, and testimony, using plea deals to obtain quick convictions, and employing questionable entrapment practices, has the federal executive and judicial branches of government found a way to circumvent the First Amendment and violate due process of the accused? To what lengths will the governing and their cohorts go to subvert the checks and balances found within our American political system of government?
I'm not sure if our hopes were ever high that we would win in Oregon as much as there was a belief we could win. I think in Nevada, our hopes were less. We also knew the stance of, you know, former Senator Harry Reid on these guys.
There's about 19 of them have been indicted. Most of them are still in jail where they belong.
And we didn't have Marcus with us.
We were facing over 100 years.
The indictment says, you know, that this group of individuals, the leaders of the conspiracy, you know, Cliven Bundy and Peter Santilli and Brian Payne and Ammon Bundy. And so that was the main group. And there was going to be this crescendo.
The Bundys swore over and over that the United States government had brought in sniper teams and surveillance equipment and had been essentially stalking their family. There's also this talk that the FBI was there and that some form of SWAT team and military like helicopters, and there are these different bases of operations set up. And again, all of this is denied and not made available to us. Ammon's attorney from the get-go in Nevada was a guy named Dan Hill. At some point in time, Dan realizes that, and I don't know how, I mean, it's uncanny how he realized this, just a clever guy. He realizes that there's got to be some sort of evidence of the operations center that the government had set up. And Dan has this idea that at one of these operation centers, there's got to be some evidence, and particularly maybe some shredding going on, right? Shredding documents. And he has the idea to reach out and see if there are any local shredding companies. And sure enough, there is one who, it turns out, had actually been contracted by the government to come and do shredding operations.
The BLM shredded documents before leaving their camp during the armed standoff with Cliven Bundy back in 2014 near his Bunkerville ranch.
Shredding operations for what? Because supposedly you don't have any big operations going on, you're just there to get cows. And I think there were 18 or so bags of shredded documents. Once we were allowed to explore what those were and where they came from, we learned that we were able to call a witness, and the witness was able to testify that there was a separate trailer at which they were shredding documents and inadvertently let slip that they were monitoring certain activities on a big, large screen. They had said to us that there was no log. There was no log of government activity in the surveillance operation going on against the Bundys because there was no supposedly no surveillance operation.
In Oregon, we took more of an offensive position. In Nevada, it was strictly defense, meaning we were acting off of what, the snipers on the hill and the throwing people down and the abusing and the destruction of the ranch and all those things. The ability for the prosecutors to control the court was the same. And this kind of helping each other out, the judge and the prosecutors, and literally steamrolling us was the same. It seemed to be like this plot almost to literally march us to the gallows.
And I remember that's the moment that Judge Navarro seemed to really kind of get intrigued, because she remembered that they had been swearing up and down that there was no log, that there was no HQ presence, right, headquarter presence. Once the judge realized that there was a log, that they had not produced it, that turned up information that there were in fact snipers, that there were in fact military-style helicopters, that there was surveillance equipment, and the government had been denying those things.
As I tried to prove the presence of snipers and was shut down, it came to light that there were snipers. In fact, the government had to turn over the map of where the snipers were lying around Cliven Bundy's house 2 nights in a row, with medium-range rifles, night vision, thermal imaging devices, the directions they had, where they'd parked their vehicles, where they had crawled in from. And these are the things I had been trying to prove.
When she gets the evidence of the snipers, and it's on the record, they're snipers, she immediately is like, I threw a guy off the stand for mentioning snipers. Yeah, my husband.
Well, I'll tell you when things changed. It was when she finally allowed some evidentiary hearings. And finally they admitted that somebody must not have got the memo. They were supposed to lie about the fact that there was a camera on that ranch house. And Ryan had asked every witness about this camera that we had seen at the ranch house. And they were like, oh, no, somebody didn't get the memo. And she's like, oh, yeah, we were watching a live feed of the ranch house through our trailer. It was like, you could have heard a pin. I mean, that was the explosion. It was just the ping.
In fact, the FBI is operating on the ground at their own headquarters. BLM has a headquarters set up, all of which are surveilling, monitoring, and keeping logs. We start to request that information. We want to have those logs. That's how we find out that there were, in fact, snipers. We find out that they're running operations. We find out that there's meetings going on with a joint terrorism task force. They're treating this as an act of terrorism from the get-go. We find pictures showing the U.S. Attorney's Office out in Bunkerville planning. Now, think about this. The people who are going to prosecute the Bundys, before they even have a protest, are out on the ground with the BLM working on how they're going to essentially entrap the Bundys into a prosecution. We see photos of BLM agents who are training attack dogs on how to attack protesters. They're holding signs and teaching the dog to attack protesters before a protest occurs.
Recently, we've heard and you've reported on rumors that there has been a move to dismiss the case against the Bundys down in Nevada. And what I am about to tell you is probably one of the reasons why. And it has to do with the unethical, potentially illegal behavior that was highlighted by Special Agent Wooten as a whistleblower in an email that, or it looks like an email, that we have confirmed the veracity of.
What's the impact of the Larry Wooten memo?
Answered prayer.
Why do you say that?
We had discussed it at numerous points throughout the trials.
About what?
That we were all hopeful that somebody in this system was not corrupt.
A man by the name of Larry Wooten, who was the lead investigator for the Bureau of Land Management investigating us for the crimes we had supposedly committed, he turned whistleblower and wrote a 14-page memo stating what had really occurred, and the case completely fell apart.
You know, they needed a head for the wall, and they didn't care if it was going to get overturned in the 9th or not, because it's the process that's the punishment, right? And if they can put them in prison for 4 years or 2 years or 6 years, and eventually it's overturned in the 9th, it's no skin off of their back. You know, they've inflicted enough damage to where it doesn't really matter.
Is the system corrupt? Does that necessarily mean that all of the people are involved are corrupt? And we believe that's not the case, that there are good people that are in the deep state, if you want to call it that. And I think Mr. Wooten, seeing, I'm sort of imposing a reality on it, but Mr. Wooten identifying that there was an intention behind these other agents' actions that was not in line with the intention of what the federal government is supposed to represent in this instance.
Larry Wooten, who is a good guy, he's not a big supporter of ours, but he is a guy who believes in the truth. He believes in justice. He writes a second memo, this is prior to my sentencing, in which it is, in total, it's over 100 pages. It is an incredible account of what really happened. The judge gets it. I'm actually mentioned by Larry Wooten by name, and the judge reads this whole thing, and it is egregious. It is disturbing, to say the least. Dan Love was carrying kill books. Dan Love was sleeping with U.S. attorneys. I mean, it is unbelievable.
Yeah, because Navarro, the judge, every intention she had, and when she pulled it off, was to put all of us in prison for as long as she possibly could.
The indictment itself, what was shown to the grand jury, if the grand jury would have not even come forward with an indictment with this information.
I face 4 life sentences in Nevada. 4 life sentences for my involvement in this grand conspiracy. That in a Nevada trial, you know, this grand conspiracy was going to be exposed in court. And I would tell them, it doesn't matter. Add 8 life sentences. We're going to walk out the door because we're here to prosecute you for your criminality. I told them every single day, we have seen the discovery. We know what you've done, and we're going to expose it. So 8 life sentences will not cause me to back down. And they hated that.
I was on private property, and except when I drove on the road, and I never threatened anybody. As a matter of fact, when law enforcement come by, I told everybody we had people at the gates because we were trying to watch the press coming in. I said, if law enforcement comes and they want to come in, just let them come in, offer them a water and greet them good morning or good afternoon, and but treat them with respect. Be civil to them. I don't want anybody doing anything that's not civil to them and not polite.
We caught them red-handed lying. We've been saying they've been lying all along. We blame them for lying and these devious things, but now we caught them red-handed in the court on the record. It can't be denied.
She dismisses the case. She says, I've got people in jail. And we're getting rid of this case. Fired the prosecutor for gross prosecutorial misconduct. Stephen Myrie fired the prosecutor, removed him from the case, removed the senior special agent, Joel P. Willis, FBI agent, from the case, admonished everyone, and dismissed the case for withholding exculpatory evidence, malicious prosecution, all of that.
We submitted information justifying why the case should be dismissed with prejudice because of all this misconduct. And she granted it.
While admitting that she had already convicted and put people in jail. Greg Burleson's one of them. He sits there to this day
Ammon had been literally tortured, taken out of his cell. Remember that in context, some people thought Ammon deserved to be in jail. I, of course, did not. And in some people's mind, that justifies putting them in jail. But what most people don't understand is when you are not a convicted person, it is against the law to punish you, okay? We agree, and I'm not saying we as in me, societally speaking and in our law, we agree that a person who has been convicted can be subjected to punishment. But when you are not convicted, you cannot be. And Ammon was chronically punished, for continually asserting that he was supposed to be a free man, that he was supposed to be treated as if he were innocent until proven guilty. And you would think that after his acquittal in Oregon, that his behavior might, his treatment might improve, but it got worse in Nevada.
I'm not anti-government, I'm pro-responsible government. I put it on my campaign signs. It's my mantra, you know. We need responsible government.
But it shows the corruption of the government, knowing that the cases were going to get thrown out and still wanting to put the people in jail who, if they didn't, the cases would have got thrown out. And then the judge wouldn't revisit any of the cases, at least on mine, because I appealed it.
I had not been sentenced yet. She had read both memos. She knew there was snipers. She knew I'd been trying to prove the presence of snipers and disallowed all of this to be brought up. We sought a new trial and she denied us. We sought relief from every angle. And as we went to my sentencing hearing, we expected me to be granted a new trial, but she ultimately sentenced me to 14 years.
At the outset of these three trials, the prosecution sought to have Judge Gloria Navarro deny the defense's pretrial motions. Doing so profoundly impacted the defense's ability to call witnesses, introduce evidence, use certain words in their defense, have access to evidence that might prove their innocence, and so much more. Was the legal process being used by bureaucrats and social institutions such as the media to establish the defendant's guilt before the defense could prove their innocence? And if so, why? January 8th, 2018, Judge Navarro berated the prosecution for willfully withholding exculpatory evidence and violating the prosecution's, quote, constitutional obligations to defend the accused due process. Ultimately, Judge Navarro dismissed the Tier 1 case with prejudice, meaning the Tier 1 defendants could no longer be tried for the 2014 Bundy standoff. Did the DOJ, FBI, and BLM commit administrative blunders that resulted in this dismissal? Or does the BLM lead investigator Larry Wooten's memos expose a multi-agency conspiracy to commit fraud upon the court?
When they said, well, there was no long guns, I've 8 spine breaks. I went up a ravine to get this. I could see that anybody, I got half an eye. I could see snipers on the hillside. For our government to say we didn't have that going on, it's crazy.
And the Hammonds were the last ranchers standing, just like here. Cliven Bundy was the last rancher standing in Clark County.
We stand with the Bundys because they stand on correct principles. And that's basically why I'm here.
What we learned from it was that in the Bill of Rights, it says that all power, the power of the government has to be limited, is limited to what it is given. But they're overstepping what it has been given and disobeying the amendment of the Bill of Rights.
What have you learned from this 4-year epic drama?
To just stand up for what's right for like everybody.
It's not about the cattle. It's not about that at all. It's about the land and what's under the ground, as well as, you know, the water, the minerals, everything. This is not about cows.
Well, they fought tooth and nail for everything they got today. Nothing was just handed to them. And had they not had a legal team and supporters out here and cameras rolling constantly, they would have been run over in this courtroom just like the first two trials went down.
Well, the government has lied throughout the whole thing. They've incarcerated, imprisoned innocent men, detained innocent men for almost 2 years, and Cliven's still sitting behind bars. These are good American, God-fearing men that are not violent criminals in any way, and they just, yes, this has to end.
This case has been dismissed with prejudice. The case is over. The indictment against Cliven Bundy, Ammon Bundy, Ryan Bundy, and Ryan Payne is done. We're waiting right now, hopefully, to get an answer within the next few minutes on whether there's going to be a case for Joe O'Shaughnessy, Jason Woods, Dave Bundy, and Mel Bundy. We're praying that the judge makes the right decision, and this case against them is done.
I have been a political prisoner for 700 days. I came in here as a free man. I didn't even leave as a free man. And I wanted to come out here and watch, let the media watch them take the shackles off me, but they wouldn't allow me to do that. And so, but anyway, I don't have the shackles on today. I only have a 15-second defense. But my defense is that I graze my cattle only on Clark County, Nevada land. And my second is I have no contract with the federal government. And I could add another. This court has no jurisdiction authority over this matter. And I've been a political prisoner for 700 days. And I'm still a little bit mad.
I just want to thank Heavenly Father for listening to all the prayers of we the people of America, because God blessed America once again today.
What we saw happen today, play out today here, has been a long time coming. The government has deceived the people, tried to, they lied, they painted themselves in a corner. And it was refreshing to see this court recognize that all of our hard work and effort in just exposing the truth is paying off. My dad's a free man. I was in prison with him for almost 2 years. I saw the suffering that he went through, my mother, my children, my brothers, their children. You can't really get that back. You know, how much is that worth? How much is the suffering of a little child and the sacrifices that our wives had to make to take care and to rear those children?
But he has never seen Gloria Navarro.
Yeah.
He has been in prison for 2 years under her ruling, yet he's never been in her presence. I, on the other hand, have sat in that courtroom many, many days, and I have listened to her rulings, and I'm grateful, because obviously she had a very big change of heart today, and I don't know what got her to that decision, but I am grateful because we have our grandfather and our uncles home. We still have a long road ahead of us for Mel and Davey and Jason and Joe, but we intend to fight this as long as it takes, and if that means going to round 4 and uncovering more of their lies and deceit and evil, atrocious actions, then so be it. We started this fight, we're gonna finish it.
Next time on The Final Verdict.
The trial starts this afternoon of an FBI agent.
Go ahead and shoot me.
Accused of lying and obstructing justice after a deadly clash with protesters occupying the Malheur Wildlife Refuge.
This type of assassination, setup, murder is not the American way, and he should have had due process just like everyone else.
They body slammed people, deployed snipers, attack dogs, MRAPs, FBI helicopters with snipers in them, arrested us, tortured many of us, starved me for 24 days.
I said, let my guy go home. You'll never hear from him again. He looks at me. He goes, I've got a conviction.
And as we went to my sentencing hearing, we expected me to be granted a new trial, but she ultimately sentenced me to 14 years.
And I said to him, Yeah, you've got a conviction now. I said, but I tell you right now, and I promise you right now, in 5 years, we're gonna have the same conversation we're having now, and you're gonna let him go home.
For some reason, problems start to happen in the lives of people who are in that case. Marcus Mumford, for example. What happens to Rick?
Yeah, and just moments ago, the jury of 8 men and 4 women found Rick Kerber, the free capitalist, guilty on 15 counts of securities and wire fraud, as well as money laundering.
You could say that they're not related, but it just becomes a little too coincidental when everybody who was involved in helping Ammon starts to get troubles in life that come from the government. Lavoie's death is not an isolated incident caused by 2 Oregon State troopers, although they did shoot him. That it is the manifestation, the result of a multi-year conspiracy by the government.
I know I'm going to be filing my complaint in the next couple of weeks, and we will pursue our wrongful death, the murder of my husband, Lavoie Finicum. So when they were set free in Oregon and the jury found those men innocent, and they went home from Oregon, absolutely, my husband would have been sitting right there with Ammon, with Ryan, with all of the first 7, and he would have been home.
A couple years ago, we filed an FTCA claim, a tort claim against the federal government. We would like to put Larry Wooten in a room under oath in a deposition. The same with Dan Love, the same with Sal Loro. The latest information that has come to light is that it does not look like, we have not been able to find that Cliven Bundy was served with a legitimate, lawful court order. We're just hoping for some answers here. We couldn't get any answers through the trials, but we would like some now. With that information, that would mean that the entire cattle gather, impoundment, and everything that they did out there, including our arrests, indictments, and prosecutions, were unlawful, unauthorized, and illegal.